Hello and welcome to this Messages for Men podcast with your hosts, me, Elizabeth Hobson, leader of Justice for Men and Boys and the Women Who Love Them, and our design director, Max Anthony. Now, I'll admit that I recently had the misfortune of turning 32 years old, but one of my favourite presents came from today's guest, who popped up in my inbox saying, "Happy birthday, Elizabeth, hope you're well. I like your work too. If you ever want to talk about things from the perspective of evolutionary psychology, do drop me a line." Well, it transpired that I did indeed want to talk about evolutionary psychology, and Johan Nayar, who has a master's degree in the subject from Brunel University, is a great person to talk to about it. He's an erudite man with a gift for neat analogies and a creative flair with which he creates awesome films and music. He's also authored a book called The Creativity Manual, designed to help readers flourish creatively. Johan, it's my pleasure to welcome you to Messages for Men.
Pleasure to be here.
As an evolutionary psychologist, where do you place yourself in the nature-nurture debate?
So by definition, an evolutionary psychologist will say there is a very significant, if not the most significant influence will come from nature, will come from genetics. But just to be clear, evolutionary psychologists are also we believe in the nurture side as well. We believe in environment. But yes, I would say biology plays the strongest role. And one example of this is if you take a high IQ child who gets adopted into a low IQ family, it won't drop their IQ significantly, and vice versa. So I know IQ is a bit of a controversial topic these days, but it's for me, it's one measure of success. And actually, yes, you would expect if it was nurture that was the key, then you would expect those changes to be significant. Similarly with twin studies as well. So twins who are separated at birth often turn out very similar.
Similarities. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I think it was John Haidt. Is it in the Happiness Hypothesis, possibly, in one of his books? I could be wrong, it could be a completely different author, but I have read that the idea that nature sets the kind of bounds of what an individual, is possibly capable of, what direction they're capable of going in, and then nurture kind of sets the exact course, which I think is quite, that makes sense to me.
Yes. I mean, the issue here is as well, it's a kind of difficult thing to measure. So if you have, for example, an academically gifted child, is this due to genetics, or is it due to environment? But you can't even separate those two, because if their parents have hardworking genes, then they themselves will have a lot of books in the house and so on, and so it will, you will definitely get a bit of influence from both. But yeah, you could have inherited the genes as well for being predisposed to hard work as well. So it's kind of
it's very difficult to kind of draw any kind of dividing line between them. So
indeed.
Sorry, just to add one point, but yes, this is in comparison with the social sciences. Many of the social sciences, especially the ones that we call woke or critical social justice subjects, or grievance study subjects, but whatever you want to call them, they are very much grounded in the blank slate model. So they're actually, we're arguing that nature has a stronger influence, but nurture is still there. They're actually arguing that nature has zero influence, which I think is going back to the blank slate of Steven Pinker. That was, he said, I shouldn't need to write this book because we know that nature plays a role. But
I know.
Yeah.
It's so clear. The evidence is overwhelming, and yet, our children are taught in schools this blank slate model. I mean, my eldest boy, when he was he 10 or 11 at this point? I think he was just 11, but he was in primary school, and he had a personal, social and health education lesson, and the teacher began by saying, "Children, do you think that biological sex is important? And they went around the whole class, and, you know, the children were meant to say yes or no and give some reasons. And, you know, it became quite clear very early on from her response to what everyone was saying that the correct answer was no, biological sex is not at all important. And unfortunately, by the time they got round to my son, they were running out of time, so he had to just say yes or no. So he said yes. And they then, you know, just spent this lesson like showing them videos about, you know, that kind of supported blank slate theory. And so my son came home and he spoke to me all about this lesson and just the ridiculous things that had been said. And I was very annoyed. So I called the school and managed to get in contact with the teacher who'd given the lesson and asked her about it. And she said, well, yes, the lesson was about smashing stereotypes because everyone deserves to have a ball. At which point I just thought, there is just no point in talking to you, is there? And so I just thanked her for her time and, you know, left it at that. And, you know, I said to my boy, look, you know, this is stuff that you're going to come up against again and again. And I didn't use these exact words, but my sentiment was that there's not any point casting pearls before swine. And so, you know, just talk to your friends about it, which is what he does, you know. And so he's kind of subversively spreading truthful ideas to mainly boys, maybe a few girls in his peer group, which I think is just awesome. But you know, but I mean, it did, in all honesty, it led to a really good conversation between me and him. And he's instinctively, I mean, you know, one of the things he said to me was, you know, they taught us that sex doesn't matter, but it does, doesn't it? And I was like, yeah. And he said that humans have evolved so that men went out and did the hunting and women stayed home and nurtured the children, didn't they? And I was like, yeah. And, wow. You know, he came out with all these ideas that just blew my mind. And I just filled in the evidence. So, you know, the studies that I'd read about that kind of supported what he was saying. And, you know, it's a tough one because on one hand, I absolutely abhor and feel really angry whenever these issues crop up in his school. But on the other hand, it is really teaching him a very healthy, critical attitude to information that he hears from authority figures.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, there's a lot there what you said, and this is, I guess, this is what's really activated me in terms of getting involved and doing like podcasts like this, and I've done another radio show recently, and it's when these positions really do tread on areas that you know a lot about. And for me, yes, biological sex. We know that biological sex is real. We know that the number is 2. And this this began like like millennia ago when actually it began as a response, I believe, to pathogens. So mitosis, which is obviously the dividing of cells. This is a very good method if you want to really duplicate your genes very quickly. But the issue comes about when it comes to a pathogen that enters enters into the gene pool, which targets your organism,
or lead a replication error, I assume. Could that happen?
Yes, I mean it. In the sense of you're more vulnerable if you're a species that reproduces asexually. You're very vulnerable to pathogens. So alongside the asexual species, some sexual species started to evolve, and the process of sexual reproduction was, yes, it's obviously a mixing of genes of 2 members of the same species, And this really is a much slower method because the male has to find the female has to find the male, but at the same time it gives you much greater defenses against bacteria or viruses, because you have these it can't be easily targeted, so yes, we come from this line of sexually reproducing species, and it's evolved for a reason, and that reason is still relevant today, so yeah, I think it's crazy to be teaching kids that.
Well, I suppose like everything you just said, like what kind of age, like I'm trying to think back to when I actually had that education, like, actually what age is that where they're either doing that now, like, just because some of what you just said will cause kind of questions that don't necessarily fit in with the answers are going to be, it's going to cause some problems, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, I'm not sure about the ages really, because I have a 4-year-old myself, but yes, I just think I think these are biological facts. Biologists know these things, and what's being sort of smothered over the top of all of this is very ideologically based, and it's not. It goes into the these what I mentioned earlier with the critical social justice studies, which are very ideological. Like, I think it's Judith Butler who said, gender or sex is a performative. It's the thing that you perform. It's the thing that you act out, and it's not. They're not based in research. They're based in ideology, and then it's because these so-called academics start publishing, and then they get cross-referenced, and then you build up this house of cards, which is just James Lindsay and Peter Boghossian and Helen Pluckrose. They go into this in great detail, but yes, it's a house of cards which is just built on cross-referencing. Can I say bullshit? I don't know. But
absolutely.
Bullshit arguments, basically. Yeah.
And then that house of cards, you get someone who then packages that information for children, who basically takes a kind of artist impression of what that house of cards looks like, and gives it a kind of some pretty colors and stuff, puts some glitter on, and then passes it directly to
although Titania McGrath has done something similar for kids, but parodying the whole thing. But yes, I think she's done a nice book on that as well. Do you know Titania?
A children's, because has she released that then already?
I believe it's out. I don't know if it's out, but yeah, it goes along as a sequel to her other book, Woke. But I've not read it, but I mean, exactly right. It's a beautifully packaged, and then you get the BBC Education saying something like there are 100 genders and teaching kids this, and it just seems completely crazy. And
I'll have to get that. I've got Woke, and it's a signed copy too, and not only is it signed, but it was bought by the author. Because I went to the Battle of Ideas 2019, it must have been, and Andrew Doyle was there.
Oh, wow.
And I'd been in contact with him on Twitter anyway, and he was doing a book signing, so I went to their bookshop to buy Woke so he could sign it, and it wasn't there. And I twittered him and said, where can I get your book? Like, I want you to sign a copy for me. And he said, oh, the bookshop had a mix-up, and so they don't have it. But I tell you what, I'll pop out to Waterstones and buy you a copy. And he did. So that was lovely.
That's amazing,
but if he's got a book for children, I know my sons would absolutely love that. So I'd definitely get that.
Yes, and I even believe, so I think satire is definitely one of the best tools. I don't know if you've seen, I have my own comedy Guru Shack thing, which you may have seen,
I
son's
have.
face of,
Yeah.
and that's my alter ego.
Yes,
But,
that's your Twitter account, isn't it? Do you want to give the handle for anyone watching? Or
yes, it's at Gurushak TV, as you would imagine it's spelled. Yeah.
Yes, we'll put it in a link in the description too.
Great, thanks.
I'm just trying to look up whether he's Yep, so that was in September 2020. So yeah, September he published it's titled My First Little Book of Intersectional Activism.
Oh my god! Oh my
Great.
god! This is so a Christmas present for the eldest.
Definitely.
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 You're gonna love that.
For sure.
I'm trying to find a copy of the front cover, but this phone isn't set up very well, so it's trying to default to Google, and Google does not want to show me any of this.
Right. And anyway, yeah, so I think this is why there's a war on comedy as well, because because satire is such a good tool for diffusing like really ridiculous ideas, and so they're really going after comedy quite hard. And I know that Facebook is sort of banning things like, and Andrew Doyle himself has been in, or Titania, the character, has been in trouble on Twitter many times and got reinstated due to a lot of pressure, you know. But yeah.
This is sorry to interrupt. This is beautiful. What he's done. I don't know. I assume you guys have seen these. Where I think it's a kind of the Rebel Girls series. Have you seen that, Elizabeth? Have you the little book for Rebel Girls? If you look up Rebel Girls, well, there's a series of books that and this is, I suppose, the problem with doing audio only, isn't it? But there's a series of a very, very like a well-funded series of books. There's like, goodness knows, there've got to be like 20 of them by now, of like feminism packaged into kind of children's books, or like very like, you know, 11, 12, that kind of thing. And I just managed to get to bring up a copy, like the actual cover for Andrew Doyle's book, and he's styled it in almost exactly the same. It's the same colors, the same kind of the general look of the thing. So it looks like it's from this series of like.
That's great. That's amazing.
What a naughty boy.
He has been a very. I don't think it's going to be it's not going to be possible for them to try and cause him any legal problems.
No.
Google is insisting that I actually look at My First Book of Feminism in brackets for boys. So
oh God!
It's trying to show me everything other than what I want to look at. But
of course.
But yeah, he's done everything he can to make it look exactly like it comes from this super woke series of
amazing. Yeah, I love what he does. Yeah, his work.
Yeah,
or her work.
That's fascinating. So yeah, there we go. So did you have another question? Did you have another question written down, Elizabeth? Or because I was going to ask about
all of our secrets. Yeah, I wanted you to. I'm waiting for you to ask the next question, Max Anthony.
I was gonna ask about your book, Johan, because this kind of ties in, since we're talking about books, and the creativity is hugely important, and you've written a book about creativity. So
yeah, so the whole thing began from my thesis, which was on the evolution of creativity, and the work of inspired by the work of Geoffrey Miller, who's a very prominent evolutionary psychologist at the University of New Mexico. And I loved his book, The Mating Mind, and it goes into great detail about how humans evolved to be creative. And so my research there was on the female preferences, and we looked at, because when you look into the past, because we spent 99% of humanity as hunter-gatherers, it was that environment that shaped our brains today. So one of the sayings in evolutionary psychology is Stone Age minds housed in modern skulls, and this is pretty much what we have. And it was female choice, because women are the more selective in our species. In most species, they are. So they shaped our evolution, and one of those was creativity, was selecting for men who were creative. So that was sort of the spark, if you like, and I sort of adapted my thesis and brought in some of those ideas into it. But then it's also influenced by my interest in NLP, which is something which I don't necessarily believe it's a scientifically strong belief system, but at the same time, for me,
that's neuro-linguistic programming, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but at the same time, for me, it's been a very it's helped me a lot on my journey, as has traveling and exploring in around India and Nepal and South America. I think all of these journeys have also influenced me. So yeah, I think I'm trying to, with the book, it's almost like a letter to myself when I was 19, and I thought, okay, yeah, I was supposed to be going to do law at university, but I didn't have any interest in it, and I ended up dropping out. And at that point, I was also thinking, wow, I just want to learn more about music and film. And so it's kind of a book that brings in some of the evolutionary side of creativity, but also some kind of practical tips and other ideas that have helped me a lot and on my journey, really. Yeah.
And in that book, do you go into some of that kind of what you were saying before about women being to largely responsible for that kind of, again, it's sexual selection. Yeah. So and you go into some of that in the book, because I think quite a few people are going to be thinking, why would women be selecting for creativity? If you see what I mean.
I do go into that in the book. And it's very interesting in the sense of so I think I touched on it briefly, but in the short term relationships, because of the pressure on women, because if in a short-term relationship, the minimum investment that a woman gives will be 5 years, because she'll if she gets pregnant, whereas that could be 5 minutes or possibly even less for a man in that situation. And it's so the women are taking the greater risk in a short-term relationship. So in that sense, they're going to be more selective, which and then if you add in the fact that Jordan Peterson talks about this, the fact that we have twice as many female ancestors as male ancestors, which means that in terms of the dating market, historically, that was twice as hard on men as it was on women. But the men who did do well, they did very well. So it was like men were at the high end and at zero in terms of reproduction. So so yeah, so for men, well, let's go to the peacock, which is a very interesting animal, which puzzled Darwin very much, because when he was developing natural selection, the idea, he had, and he wrote on the origin of species, it was a very solid argument for, and it explained most of evolution, but there was a massive portion which completely puzzled him, which was, why is the peacock not a very camouflaged bird that sort of blends into the jungle? Why is it dazzling and bright, which makes it's like having a siren on its head saying, predators, come and find me, I'm here, you know.
And indeed, the tail is not exactly kind of particularly aerodynamic or anything,
No.
is it? Either
No.
a bit
Very
of
lumbersome.
yeah. Mm.
Yeah, if you want to try and run from a predator, that tail is a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
So this brings us to the work of Amos Zahavi, who is a evolutionary biologist, and he studied and he wrote a book called, it's very unpolitically correct, the title these days, but it's called The Handicap Principle. And I don't know if you've heard of that one, guys, or no. So the Handicap Principle is the idea that for the females who are selecting the males.
Yes, I do remember this. Yeah,
you do know. Yeah. So the peacock, the mating of the peacock is they go into this formation called a lek, which is it's something to do with one of their rituals or something, in ritual, one of their cultural activities. So in a lek, the peacocks all line up in different positions, and the females will go around and assess them on how dazzling and how beautiful their tails are.
Kind of like Take Me Out.
I don't know what Take Me Out is. I don't know what the reference
Take
is.
Me Out is a program with a load of women in a kind of semicircle, and then men come down in a lift and have to kind of perform for the women. Okay. And the women all like choose whether or not they're willing to go on a date with them.
Okay, I guess that's probably, they probably stole that from this principle. Oh. But anyway, yeah. So in that sense, yeah. So the females are very selective, and they will actually just wait in a queue for the one who is the dazzling one, and just wait around.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very orderly. But so yeah. So the handicap principle is the idea that if it's what's called an honest signal. So in the sense that this peacock is still alive despite this handicap of having a siren effectively on its head, and therefore he must have all of these traits which I want in an offspring: athleticism and intelligence. And so just the mere fact that he's in existence is a sign. It's an honest signal, basically, which basically gets the female peahens very ready.
It's something that you can't fake. That's what it.
Exactly.
That's what it is.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, because if he was injured or slow or not, he would not be alive. So
he wouldn't be there. Yeah.
And actually, they've done some pretty nasty research on some peacocks, and they pluck out some of their. Oh, no. They do that, and then they put them on the mating scene, and it actually does.
Oh, how cruel!
Correlate. And one of the weirdest things about this is that actually our eyes are so similar, if you like, to the peacock's eyes, that what we perceive as beautiful is the same as what the peahens perceive as beautiful. So it's the peacocks we like, they like as well. But yeah, so that's from the female side. But actually, there's a very interesting point from the female side, which is, I don't know if you've heard of the Scheherazade strategy. Scheherazade being the character in 1001 Arabian Nights. So yeah, so you know the book, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's where Aladdin comes from, and Alibaba and all of that. And the Scheherazade strategy is it's a different principle. So the first one is how to get a mate, and so females are choosing males based on creativity, which is a sign of like the handicap principle. If he can keep that, for example, if he can keep down a job and still be creative, wow, he must have good genes or whatever.
Presumably, from a hunter-gatherer perspective, though, creativity suggests an ability to problem solve as well, because hunter-gatherer life must have been beset by problems like trying to find food, trying to find shelter, trying to keep warm, trying to keep everyone alive. And so if you have a creative mind, you are more likely to be able to solve those problems.
Yeah, I think that's where so this is where you have often you have a crossover from natural selection into sexual selection. So the initial spark of creativity probably would have started with those natural selection traits, but then as it evolved, it just like the peacock's tail evolved, it would then be yes, it will go into the sexual selection area, where it's a trait which is attractive purely because it's like wasteful in a sense. It's like it's a form of wastefulness, and you know, as we see from you know, guys who flash money and watches, you know, wastefulness is a sign of resources,
having
or
all the basics covered, well
yeah,
covered.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's why, you know, and in that sense it's also connected to status, because the creative men, especially in hunter-gatherer world, they may not have been the good hunters, they may not have been the tribal leader, but they would have, because so much of the time would have been at night when you're sitting around a fire. Who's going to tell the stories? Who's going to do a bit of singing or whatever, and sing a song? Or so in that sense, creativity is probably started with natural selection, and then moved into the sort of sexual selection area.
Interesting.
And this ties into humor essentially, doesn't it? And like we've been talking about like, you know, we've talked about Andrew Doyle, and that the creativity essentially then in certain areas can turn into humor, and that's so I assume that must come up in yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, yeah, in my book and my thesis as well, that was one of the big topics that I looked into. So it was like a 2x2 grid, where you had a guy who was creative and funny, a guy who was creative but not funny, a guy who was funny but not creative, and then the guy who was neither. I think I've got it right. Anyway,
yeah,
it was like a 2x2.
That's what you said to me.
Yeah, and then the one who was creative but not funny had a better chance than the one below him who was neither, and then the one who was funny but not creative also had a better chance, but actually it did not have an additive effect, that if you put them together you're going to have even more. So that's what my sort of research showed. And then also you would look into the menstrual cycle. So on the fertile days, it was either funny men or creative men that women preferred, and then on the non-fertile days of the cycle, it was it was not so. It was more important during the fertile days, which goes into many other traits. So like a masculine face. That was where this sort of research, if I remember correctly, where it started. The more masculine features were preferred on the fertile days, and then it goes more into the more feminine features. Not more feminine, but relative to the more masculine face. It was always slightly on the masculine side of the middle, but because of the sort of the benefits, I guess, of picking a man with high quality genes, even if that meant a lower chance of commitment. So women developed preferences based on the cycle as well.
Yeah, and you call that you're referring to your dual strategy.
Dual strategy, yes.
Yeah.
So good dads and good genes. So the good dads is, so it's always going to be a conflict for women, the man they choose. And actually, if you look into a lot of literature for women, romance literature, it's always an unattainable guy that the woman has to attain. So he probably has both. He's got power and money. What's that?
And attain.
Yeah, exactly. So he has power and money, and he's attractive. So that makes him very desirable. Even something like 50 Shades has that element to it. And then she has to tame him, and that is the conflict that women have, is that the men who are more provider types and more likely to commit will be may not have the genes on a higher level, and then the men who have the good looks and the good genes, they're going to be less committed, because they know that they have more sexual market value. So yeah, that's the conflict that that women have, and so the likelihood of cheating or and so on will happen on the fertile days. But again, this kind of goes into the evolution of why humans evolved females evolved a concealed ovulation as well.
Yes, which is another fascinating subject, actually. You
Definitely,
were saying that, as far as you know, we're the only species who does that or has that.
Yes. So if it was super clear the fertile days, then our male ancestors would have to guard the females just during those days, and then they could leave them to go around and try and look for other women or whatever. Whereas the concealed, it was a female sort of, it's always a it's what they call co-evolution. So traits are evolving, and then there are counter traits evolving, and there is a battle of the sexes. There's no doubt about it, and a lot of different traits have evolved in response to traits being evolved, other traits being evolved, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
I'm just having a look at
Shall I just touch on the Scheherazade thing, or which I didn't get onto.
Yeah. So
sorry, I interrupted, didn't I?
That's all right. No, that's fine. So so going back into the Scheherazade strategy, so we can see from humans that that both men and women have with the sorry, with the right genes and with the right commitment, both men and women can reach the same heights of creativity. But in terms of the evolution of it, the Scheherazade strategy argument is the idea that well, if we go back to 1001 Nights, the book is a sequence of stories which, well, let's go into the story itself. So Scheherazade was the daughter of one of the top ministers in this kingdom, and the king was a very brutal king who every day he would marry a new woman from his kingdom and then consummate the relationship and then kill her in the morning. So he was a bit of a sick bastard, and the reason he did that was because one of his wives cheated on him. So in order to ensure that she wouldn't do that, or the new wives wouldn't do that, he would kill them in the morning. So when the minister's daughter said, "I want to marry the king," he said, "You can't do this." But she had a cunning plan up her sleeve. And when she was there after the wedding and in the evening, she asked if her little cousin or something could stay in and spend a bit of time with them, or say farewell. So then she began telling a story to this little cousin, and it was such a well-constructed story that when it got to dawn, the king came in and got mesmerized by the story, and she cut it off before the ending. And so he said, "I want to hear the end of the story." And she said, "Oh, I'm very tired now. Let's discuss it tomorrow." So then she began another, she finished the story the next night. So he kept her alive. And then she did the same sort of cliffhanger trick. And she did this for 1001 Nights. By that time, he'd fallen in love with her and had many children, or had children with her. And she became the queen, So it's, the idea here is that women evolved it in part, I would say, to do with the selection of a man with creative traits. But the second, one of the other aspects would be the Scheherazade strategy, which is a way of keeping a man. By creativity is, for men, is a way of getting women, whereas for women it's a way of keeping men. So it's still in the realm of sexual selection, but slightly different path of evolution. Yeah.
They need to rename that to "How do you keep a sick bastard in suspense?"
Yeah, that would be a good name. Yeah.
Did you want to do one of the kind of pre-written questions, Elizabeth?
Yes, I'm waiting for you to read it out.
Again, we have, it just sounds like we're building it up, but yeah. So
I'm sure you can put the cuts in if you want.
I will.
So Elizabeth writes, you point out that the Lockean idea of the tabula rasa, or blank slate, which is the standard social sciences model, is attractive in part because true equality is not achievable if some are given a genetic head start. Would you agree, though, that true freedom is not achievable if we continue to hang on to this demonstrably flawed idea?
Yes, for sure. I can see its influence in a lot of places, and as I mentioned earlier, this was one of the things that really activated me in this battle of ideas. So yes, in terms of true freedom, I think that the blank slate model is at the basis of a lot of these ideas, such as critical race theory or gender studies ideas, which say that men and women are essentially the same, and it's only a culture or environment that makes us different. So yeah, I can see a lot of issues to do with just the freedom to be, and the freedom for boys to be boys and girls to be girls, and it's coming from, yeah, it's creating a lot of issues, and a lot of the things that are influenced on it and based on it are incorrect, I believe.
Yeah, and I think, the sort of gender equality paradox as well really serves to prove that given freedom, which, in the Nordic countries is provided by a very secure welfare system that enables people to do exactly what they want and know that they will be able to eat and house themselves and be financially, settled. Yeah, sort of just proves that men and women on the whole have different preferences and will pursue different lives.
Definitely, yeah. I don't know if have you seen that? Is it Norwegian? It's like a YouTube series with a comedian guy. I think it's called Brainwash.
Oh no.
It's really, really good, and he goes into it and he meets all these. I believe they were Norwegian or Swedish. Anyway, these academics who are very strongly into these blank slate ideas, and then he goes and meets people like Simon Baron-Cohen, and Simon Baron-Cohen's work.
Oh yes,
and his book, The Essential Difference, really does cover this in detail, and how men are more systemizing and women are more empathizing, and this really does tie in with the arguments coming from evolutionary psychology, which are that in the hunter-gatherer world, where the men were doing more hunting, and where the women were more closely based into the community and looking after children. So there was different paths of evolution there, and for a man, if he saw the deer and he was hunting and he said, "Oh, it's just so beautiful, it's so cute," and then he didn't throw his spear, that would be a lot of trouble, and also, it's a stereotype that I guess feminists hate, but yeah, the greater range that the men were having to go to for the hunts gave this spatial memory that, the men reading maps idea.
I know I don't have that.
Yeah. And then for the women, yeah, if they were much more closely knit, so a lot of abilities that women have over men, like linguistic abilities and empathizing abilities, this would have been in part to do with the social bonds within a close community. If you need if you could be the matriarch, for example, of that tribe, or if you could have good social interactions with the whole group, that's gonna put you at a strong advantage. And most obviously it's looking after the babies, so this is one of the things that, again, feminists are trying to push back against, is the mothers looking after their babies, and whereas from the evolutionary perspective, it makes sense, because the female perception is so finely tuned to every detail of what the baby's going through and how to deal with that. So I would argue, yes, women are better than men in that area. So yeah, I think there's a lot going on there. And I think there's always one more point, which is the work of Lee Jassim, where he shows that women who are going into the arguments about STEM, why there are more men in STEM, Lee Jassim has looked at the studies, and it shows that for some men, they have a strong numeracy advantage. So if they have a very high numeracy, they will often not have a very low linguistic abilities, whereas women who have high numeracy also have high linguistic abilities, which opens many more doors for those women.
Oh, right, that's interesting, because I know Alessandro Strumia showed that both men and women were they were more likely to cite male authors of papers, but in kind of physics specifically. But he showed that women were much more likely to be promoted and given grants and all of this stuff on fewer citations and less work. But I suppose, you know, I do think that part of that is a bias towards women based on the political climate of the times. But actually, you know, the fact that if you've got a woman who's really good at physics, she's also likely to be really good at, you know, relating to people, might actually help to explain that too, mightn't it?
Definitely, yeah. So yeah, I mean, and then that could bring us, I suppose, to James Damore's Google Memo, where yes, I think if you start putting in affirmative action things into place, where so the men with a high numeracy, if you start, for example, dropping the score that women need to get into computer sciences or get the jobs, then you're actually disadvantaging these guys who pretty much got this one thing, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas,
well, I mean, positive discrimination for one group is negative discrimination, just plain old discrimination, for any group outside of that group, any group not included.
Definitely. And yeah, I mean, preferences play a huge role. And so yeah, his memo came out, and it was something that was requested by Google, and he wrote it because he was that type of person. I believe he was on the autistic spectrum, but so he just took it as a literal thing. Yeah. yes. Anyway, yeah. So he wrote it, and then he was actually saying some things which were very much grounded in evolutionary psychology, and
yet he was sorry to interrupt. He was like just smeared as a terrible sexist, despite you know, he was saying what you were saying about like nurturing, you know, talking about what those advantages and disadvantages are, so providing that kind of balanced view. And yet I think
but not only that, but he was very careful to make very reasonable, solid suggestions of how they might make these fields more welcoming to women and encourage women in. But just because he raised, you know, the ghastly spectre of sex differences,
which is funny in a way when you think about it, when he was suggesting that science showing women being more focused on nurturing, therefore you could take that instinct and then find ways to kind of to alter the environment so that it would more appeal. It's just funny that he would be smeared as a sexist, where I can't remember who it was that Gloria Steinem was speaking to, but she was interviewed at one point and said, and the interviewer said, "But you do agree that women are better nurturers?" And she just she had a stony face, and she just went, "No, next question."
Wow.
Like, literally. And whereas if you asked someone like James Damore a question similar to that, which is like he would give you the reasons why he why he would have that view, whereas she just said no, next question.
Yeah, no, that's politically inefficient, move on. But I mean, you know, I think we should inject just a little bit of nuance at this point and point out that, you know, there are plenty of outliers, and there are, you know, women who are very much into systems and, you know, less into people, and there are men who are incredibly nurturing. But, you know, in terms of looking at the trends in outcomes over populations, sex differences are going to create disparities, and that's fine.
Definitely, and it's at the extremes that you see those and he actually points it out with the graphs, saying that, you know, the way that the argument that they're saying is that there are men are here and women are here, when actually it's two curves that overlap, but the strongest differences really do occur at the extremes. So like men and women over 2 meters, you're going to have such a strong ratio of men to women in that area. And yeah, I mean, and when they, going back to the treatment of him afterwards, a lot of places actually stripped down the references that he had, and he was referencing real science. And Geoffrey Miller, who I mentioned earlier, and Deborah So wrote a great piece, or four scientists, I think it's called How Four Scientists Respond to the Google Memo. They were calling it a screed as well, but anyway,
yes,
4 scientists refer to or respond to the Google Memo. It's a great article. And yes, I think Geoffrey Miller said he would have got an A in evolutionary psychology for his if it was a paper or something. Yeah.
The other thing I found just hilarious was, you know, he suggested that women were, you know, more emotional, and a load of women at Google responded by refusing to go to work after the memo was sent out.
That is quite hilarious. That's really hilarious. Yeah.
But you refer in your work to a woke religion, and the religiosity in radically regressive politics is something that hasn't escaped me. From the rejection of science, like we've been talking about, to ideas of sanctity and original sin, creation, fall, and redemption-based stories, blasphemy, and Puritanism, I think it's absolutely fair to label wokeness as a religion. And I've heard an alternative term for Homo sapiens, which is Homo religiosus, and it really appeals to me. I do think there are rare individuals who lack that religious impulse, but I agree with John Haidt's theory from The Righteous Mind that our ability to hold fantastic ideas collectively and to then translate them into reverence for sacred objects that we group around is what has enabled our species to work together in huge collectives of non-related individuals. As an evolutionary psychologist, I'd like to know whether you have any time for this theory, and if so, given that God is dead and that wokeness is utterly toxic, is there any creed or set of ideas that you think could function to bind our societies together and facilitate healthier ways of life?
Yeah, I think we were heading, before this woke wave started taking over, I think we were actually heading into a quite a good place. So I'm culturally diverse myself. My mum is from Guyana in South America. My dad is born in Malaysia, but I have roots in India. So, you know, when I was growing up, I was aware of racism. I experienced it a little bit, but then I think there was just over the years, year by year, it became less and less relevant. And then suddenly in the last, seems like 5 years or 10 years, race suddenly seems very relevant. Gender suddenly seems very relevant. So I think we were in a good place. And now, yes, this...
we had made significant progress. I mean, it's The Madness of Crowds, isn't it, by Douglas Murray, where he points out repeatedly, with all these different fields of identity politics, just on the cusp when we seem to have made massive progress, all the activists sprang up and started saying it's never been as bad as it is now. You know, it's bizarre.
I think there was a funny thing I saw with Stormzy saying, you know, he's the first black person to headline Glastonbury, and then Skunk Anansi tweeted or something back and said, actually, you're wrong there, you know. Yeah, exactly.
Good girl.
So yeah, but I mean, yeah, when I was listening to music in my teens and 20s, yeah, it was just music. It wasn't like this is a black artist, this is a white artist. It was just, you know, whatever you felt was a great tune, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's such a shame to see that all sort of fading, and these new ideas. And yeah, I mean, I think there's a very nice book which I'm only halfway through, which goes alongside The Madness of Crowds, which is Gad Saad's book, The Parasitic Mind. And he relates this very much to these mind parasites that take over certain animals. So one of the examples he gives is it's quite dark, but there's this wasp that stings the spider, and then the sting basically makes the spider completely lose track of what it is to be a spider, and then the wasp sort of lays the eggs on the spider, and then he starts building these cocoons for these eggs who start devouring it alive, and it's anyway. So he says, yes, this wokeness, or the wokeness is a kind of mind virus that just takes over, and it doesn't necessarily lead to survival or reproduction. It's kind of counter the principles of evolution in that sense, but it's like it's a mind virus. And it's a great book as well, which goes alongside Douglas Murray.
And is there an antidote?
Well, this is what I'm hoping that these conversations that we're having now, and these fantastic books that are coming out are going to be, the pushback against critical race theory and all of the gender ideology. I think this is what is going to be an antidote, and it is definitely possible with good arguments to red pill, if you like, to red pill people into the truth, really. And so I'm still optimistic, but I can definitely see some of the going back to the religious ideas. Yes, like political correctness has taken over from blasphemy as a way of watching your words, although as we've seen recently, blasphemy laws are being implemented in France by vigilantes effectively recently, with Samuel Paty. And then you have original sin, which is the concept of privilege, so it's someone is born effectively evil, and that is almost like a replica of original sin. So I mean, I've heard people make the argument that once you take away God, then you have this radical leftist ideology which takes its place. And it's definitely, I'm very much into the Enlightenment values, and I believe that is the answer, and people have to start speaking up, and there is a silent majority of people who need to stop being silent, I guess.
I suppose this is where I end up sounding a bit like a kind of pessimist. Okay. But I think the warning even down has been like sounded for quite a while. Like the example you were using there about the wasp and the spider, right? I'd have to look. Yeah. So Daniel Dennett, he's I think he's if I recall correctly, he's a philosopher.
Yeah.
He wrote a book. I looked it up when you brought up the spider and the wasp, because it was perfectly linked in. But he wrote a book called Breaking the Spell: Religion as a Natural Phenomenon back in 2006, and the front cover of his book is a little ant crawling to the top of a blade of grass, and
right, it's another one.
Yeah, that's another example of a mind parasite.
Sure.
And I just
tell that story, someone, for anyone who doesn't know about that species?
I think Johan, you would do a better job of telling that story.
I can't quite remember exactly what it was, but it's something like a fungus that benefits from having the ant just go zombified and going to the top of the
to be eaten by birds.
To be eaten by birds, that was it, yes.
That's it, yeah. And then the birds eat it and, you know, excrete it, and the fungus is spread.
Right, that was it, yeah.
Yeah. But I suppose it's the fact that these kind of ideas of these kind of warnings have been sounded as far back as 2006, and I suppose this is where I think that Douglas Murray and others, when they cite these kind of things as being very recent, like, oh, this has happened in the last decade, I think it's definitely the case that this has been worked on for decades and decades.
I would say at least a century, personally.
Yes, it does go back, and I mean, I'm sure.
And there were warnings back then too.
Yeah, and I think the Frankfurt School is one of the places where a lot of these ideas really got going, and and that's related back to the fall of economic Marxism, which then gets replaced by this, some call it cultural Marxism, or but yes, it's the replacement of that, and it's not actually, some people prefer Marxian in the sense that it's no longer economic anymore. So if it's not economic, then is it still Marxism? But yeah, whichever way you look at it, it's oppressed and oppressor, and the oppressor groups need to be overthrown.
Yeah, I mean, you know, in terms of my optimism / pessimism, I'm not sure if the glass is half empty or half full. I suppose I have hope. And, you know, as you say, Johan, that's why I'm having these conversations. You know, that's why I do the work I do, because I have hope that we can readjust the direction that our societies are going in. But whether I have faith is something, you know, that I struggle with regularly. You know, sometimes I do when Lawrence Fox is in the news, and then sometimes I don't when I realize that, you know, there's a really important book called Red Colour News Soldier.
Okay, no, I don't know that one.
Right, it was, I thought I showed that to you when you were at my house, Max. I've forgotten who it's written by. I can see it over there, but I haven't got my good glasses on, so I can't read the author's name. But
you showed me so many books, there was no way for me to remember.
But this was the most important one. So he was a photojournalist during the Cultural Revolution in China, and he risked his life and the lives of his family by, instead of destroying incriminating pictures of the revolution, hiding them in his house. And, you know, he was searched, and, you know, he had a wife and a child, and not only them, but also his parents, you know, wider family, had those photos have been found, would have been in mortal danger. But he kept them, and he smuggled them out to the West sort of decades later. And they were published in a book that has, you know, a really fascinating autobiographical account of what he witnessed. And I found it in a charity shop. I'd never heard of it before. And I read it and was just utterly mind blown and really incredibly disturbed, because the parallels between what he witnessed and what we see now are numerous. And also, you know, one really major impression that it left on me was just the speed of how everything accelerated, you know, from kind of bad ideas to people dying in large numbers. And so I was really, you know, moved by the book, and I was really pleased that I'd found it and that it was now in my collection. And when my children are a little bit older, they'll get to pour through it and learn something. And I, you know, thought I'd really like to get this for a friend of mine who has a boy the same age as mine, who's also very based. And I looked it up online, and discovered that you can't get a copy of it for less than like 50 quid.
Wow.
And
Okay.
because it had only been published, one run. And I thought, for God's sake, this man risked his life and the lives of his family to bring this really critically important information to us, and we can't even be bothered to buy his book, so it's never been republished. And how many times has the Communist Manifesto been out of print, I wonder?
Yeah.
When I find sort of that interlude, I was depressed for a couple of days after that, just thinking it's hopeless. But there you go. So I don't know. I have hope though.
Can you repeat the details for that book? The type the
Okay,
for the
I'll go and grab it. Hang on. Ah, yes. So it's Red Color News Soldier by Li Zhensheng.
Right. And when was it written?
Well, it was published in. Where's the details? Where are the details? This is unusual.
Oh yeah.
Hang on. Bear with me. Aha. First published in 2003.
Okay. Wow.
So there you go.
Yeah.
Max, do you want to read the final question?
Yeah, I think that a future episode should probably focus on that book. So I'm making a note of that. So yes, Elizabeth's final question.
I'm going to cut out every time you say Elizabeth said.
We have to talk about the reading out questions, but yeah. So a final issue you raised was that of gender atypical boys who may, for example, be gay, if not simply effeminate, being pressured first into a social transition, which then increases the chances of a medical transition due to the trans trend. What do you think is driving this sinister development that seems to have come upon us so suddenly, and just at the point where homosexuality seems to be widely accepted?
So I think it seems to be driven by what's known as heteronormativity, which is the idea that a normal person has a relationship with someone of the opposite sex. So I guess parents who have a boy who is effeminate and likely to be gay, they would actually prefer him to then change his gender and then become a girl, and then they will go on and have normal relationships. So I think that's part of the drive, and for sure the trans activism is a big part of that as well. And yes, I think it's problematic in the sense that it's really going against homosexuality. Gay boys who are growing up should be allowed to just eventually grow out of the, in the sense of the this pressure of changing their gender, and actually just keep their body the same and then come out as a gay man. So I think this is one of the kind of conflicts which I can see definitely growing, much like we see the conflicts between the trans exclusionary radical feminists and the trans movement. I think this will also be one of those conflicts, which yes, a lot of Deborah So does some great work on this topic, and she actually had to leave academia because she was beginning to publish work which contradicted this ideological narrative of wokeness, if you like, and so she started stepping out of academia voluntarily, and then she recently finished The End of Gender, which goes into this in great detail. It's a great book, and it covers this detail this covers this in great detail, and how actually without a before the hormonal medical transition, you have a social transition. But if you have a social transition, you're much more likely to have the medical transition. Whereas a lot of children who don't go through this, they desist, and then they eventually start identifying as being a gay man. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's all incredibly sad, because it feels like even 20 years ago, I suspect it was quite difficult due to stigma to come out as gay. And then we had this kind of short window, you know, where 10 years ago, it was pretty much accepted by almost anybody.
If not trendy, almost.
If not trendy, exactly.
Yeah.
And now there's this even more kind of sinister pressure on these children, you know.
And even trendier. Even trendier.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
You know, and I also, you know, I know from experience, when I was 7, my teacher asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I said I wanted to be an astronaut or a boy. And then for about a month, I socially transitioned, shall we say, and everyone in class called me Fred. And I actually have some exercise books on them with the word Fred, because I was a bit of a tomboy as a little kid. And then after a month, I'd had my fun and I was Elizabeth again. And, you know, I have grown up to enjoy being a woman immensely. And, you know, it terrifies me, the idea that had I have done that now, instead of just playing along with me, adults would have stopped treating me like a child who was playing and decided to treat me as an adult who was competent of making life-changing decisions. And it's just really not clear to me that, you know, embarking on the pathway to medical intervention is a good thing for people. And, you know, I do think that I think that it is too trendy at the moment. And I think that there are a lot of people, I mean, we know that there are a lot of people misdiagnosed as having gender dysphoria because they then, you know, go through the procedures, transition, then detransition, and their stories are really harrowing. But even for people who have genuine gender dysphoria and really are trans and really have, you know, a female brain in a male body or the opposite, it's not clear to me that having surgery to correct your physical sex and then, you know, embarking on a war with your DNA that will last for the rest of your life is necessarily the right path for every trans person. And, you know, obviously when people are adults and they decide that that is the right path for them, that's entirely up to them. But, you know, I mean, I look at this idea and, you know, it's people say, well, you know, these people are unhappy with their bodies. They're unhappy with their bodies. And I'm like, I don't know anyone who's happy with their body. You know, welcome to the human race. We are, you know, innately, instinctively always unhappy with our bodies, and then we get older and start accepting it a bit more. And I know, you know, Camille Paglia calls herself trans these days, and she also says that, you know, she's bloody glad that she is of an age where, you know, she had all of those kind of feelings and that confusion before medical intervention was kind of pushed to the degree that it is today, because she wouldn't want to have transitioned in that kind of medical way.
So yeah, I think Yes, so gender dysphoria is a very, it's a very real condition. But as you said, we shouldn't be encouraging children to be transitioning. When there should definitely be an age for me where, having tried alternative options, then the adult is ready to decide, no, this is still what I want to do. But yeah, I think the ages that we're allowing kids to transition, and yeah, sometimes I think it's actually this more worrying trend which is happening amongst girls actually, which is the sudden onset gender dysphoria, which is where one I think that the rates are something like 70 times more likely if you're in this group where one girl transitions and then a whole bunch of other girls in that social group. And I think that's probably something to do with the female brain, I guess. But
there's a school in Brighton, and I forget the statistics, but they have the most immense proportion of trans children, and it's like, really, do you really think that all of these children are, seriously dysphoric, gender dysphoric, or do you think there's something else going on here, Brighton?
Yeah, so yeah, it's I think it's a topic which definitely needs to be explored, but as Deborah Say points out, it's anything that, because of the sort of takeover of academia now by these activist type thinkers, it's very hard for papers that actually say, well, actually, desistance is a very real thing, or there is a phenomenon called sudden onset gender dysphoria, which I just mentioned, which is very much for happening in girls groups. And there's also another type of trans, which is the Autogynophilia, which I don't know if you may have heard of, but it's when so a lot of, I think a lot of people who have gender dysphoria are same-sex attracted, so same-sex in terms of their biological birth sex, whereas there is also another category within that, which is autogynophilia, which is the attraction. You're actually attracted to the opposite of your birth sex, but you get extremely turned on by by dressing in women's clothes and then going a step further. And again, these studies are being criticized as transphobic, and the state of academia is going into a very bad place, and
very dark.
It's worrying, because people who speak out are either have to leave, like Colin Wright and Deborah So had to leave academia, or you need to be a professor like Jordan Peterson or Gad Saad, who I believe they both have tenure. I don't know about Peterson now, but they're very secure in their jobs and they can speak out. But
as soon as you use a word like autogynophilia, that's like kind of, they're like a piranhas. They'll like that. That's a word. Yeah, that's a word that indicates that you're either. I think the first instance for something like that, they would assume that you're a quote unquote TERF,
right.
Or indeed, and then obviously find out that someone like Deborah So is as far as I know, she's not a feminist, but
yes, she's not. No.
Yeah, so or just someone who would be concerned about that kind of thing. But from my experience of interacting with these people, I mean, autogynophilia is one of those things that they will just completely and totally deny as a conspiracy theory. And of course, obviously,
and anyone who even goes so far as to listen to anyone who has, who says that word, must be, attacked.
So I think it kind of brings us back to the same sort of points we've coming to many times, is that society needs to come to terms better with homosexuality. We don't need to transition young children. Society needs to be more sex positive in the sense of less prudish, if you like. So, you know, we're not going to attack someone on the basis of them having being aroused by being a woman. You know, that's something which we can probably still work on. And yeah, I think there are so many, and then mental disorder as well. You know, I think if you're going to, yeah, I can understand that there is a defense against calling gender dysphoria a mental disorder, in the sense that we don't necessarily treat people with mental disorders so well. But the solution is not to rebrand it as something else. The solution is that let's keep having the conversation, and open conversation, and become more accepting of it. And I mean, I think, you know, people are decent enough to, I mean, there are obviously going to be people on the extremes who will say, you know, all trans people are mentally ill and therefore blah blah blah. But I think, yeah, we can try and remove the stigma of the, you know, if you're gonna transition and have a lifetime on hormones, and take your fertility will maybe you'll start becoming infertile. And if you do decide to detransition, you know, if a man becomes a woman and then becomes a man again, you know, he will you know, he will probably never be able to have a proper erection again. You know, there are so many factors there. And yeah, the solution is not to silence everyone and deny that these like you said, Max, with the autogynophilia, you know, deny that they actually exist and call it a conspiracy theory.
Well, they'll deny that. It's interesting, actually. This ties right back into the religiosity thing, in terms of, so someone, I think you have to go to a more devout religious person for this. But if someone leaves the religion, it will be a kind of the defense, the denial will be that you were never a Christian to begin with. Exactly, now, obviously, there are plenty of Christians who don't react in that way. But I think, and obviously, Christianity is not the only religion. I'm just using that as the example because that's the one I'm familiar with in terms of doing this. But saying you were never a Christian to begin with, the fact that you've left means that you were never a true Christian. And this exactly the same thing gets used in this, of when someone's detransitioning, like it will literally be that same denial of saying, well, you were just never trans to begin with. It's like, no, this person really did believe. And it's astonishing, the parallel there is just.
No, it's a special kind of vitriol, it appears, for people who detransition. You know, they go from being celebrated because they're confirming what, you know, when they transition, they're confirming what radical trans activists want to believe, and then
it's celebrated
their minds. And detransition, then suddenly they are pariahs, and, you know, they are bigots and transphobes. And, you know, the fact that they've detransitioned means that they don't believe that there are real trans people. And, you know, it is just really sad, as I think you were saying, you were saying, Max, that these radical activists are now completely incapable of having good faith conversations. It is literally a matter of them sitting and listening for a word or a phrase that they can hook into and what's the word? Dismiss everything that's being said, you know, and there is no space for context, and there is no space for, you know, repeating and saying, you know, is this what you're trying to say? You know, it's just like, it's sad, and
that's very unscientific, because science needs, you know, any scientific idea needs to be able to be put under scrutiny. But if you're going to hide it,
it's just anti-science. It's like anti the entire concept of education in any form.
Definitely.
And it's interesting how like I've actually like, while you were saying that, Elizabeth, I could pick out, because I've spent some time with such people, and I've kind of gone over this in other other kind of context, but I've had that experience sitting down with someone, you know, like literally a transgender person, and we've had a kind of the meeting has material that was kind of sent round to everybody beforehand, and the material was something that was not going to fit in with this person's like view of the world. And it was interesting how this person, he said like literally what you were saying there, Elizabeth, like though not being aware that he was doing it, of saying, I was trying to listen out for an example. He was trying to he was waiting for something that would indicate
incriminating evidence
that the person was a bigot, and in this case it didn't really work, because there was nothing to grab onto. So that I kind of thought, someone in our circles, for example, Johan, I imagine that if you were to say something like that you were only that you were listening to this person, and you weren't really listening, you were just waiting. You were waiting for something that you could use to do. I imagine that you would, like, saying that to someone, you would probably feel a certain sense of shame that you were doing that. You would feel a certain, you would feel a little guilty that you weren't actually listening to this other person. You were just waiting for a key word or some little, whereas
very dysfunctional.
Yeah. Whereas to this person, it was entirely normal. Like you wouldn't feel at all ashamed, even slightly, because it's entirely normal that you would only listen to them, so like that you're not actually listening.
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced that a lot in various debates that I've had, and I feel like I've got a bit better at it regarding how I sort of handle and engage in these debates. But yes, I think it's you're right. There are things that people are just going to immediately pick up on and try and denounce everything that you said based on that one thing. Yeah.
So it means that you have to play a kind of a special game with language, so that you never actually say rapid onset, like what I keep
gender dysphoria.
Yeah, I keep getting that mixed up, because it's similar to another acronym. But the same with autogynophilia, that they will you have to kind of, I think, what's that called? Is that the euphemism treadmill? Have you
heard of that? No.
Right. Well, that's the Elizabeth. You have?
No.
Yes, you have.
No, I haven't.
Okay. But that the thing of how and obviously this applies in, I think probably it's even faster in a kind of schoolyard kind of context, where a word becomes a kind of slur, or a kind of mean word, or it becomes offensive, and then you have to find a new word that you're allowed to say. I think I'm probably butchering the explanation of it, but it is called the euphemism.
I've heard the concept before. I never knew the name of it, but yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah,
I can see it in action.
Yes, and it's an interesting
and then,
name.
Yeah, like I've even just seen today that the acronym BAME is now out.
No,
that's only just come in. Like, I don't know. Yeah, like it's what's that?
I said that didn't have a long shelf life.
That didn't have a long shelf life.
We just got used to it, for Pete's sake.
Anyway, I hate it. I hate the acronym, but yeah, it's apparently.
What's it been replaced with? Because
I just can't keep up. But yeah, I think it's the that's what Douglas Murray says, is that if you just keep lowering the bar, then you can just find more and more Nazis everywhere. So it's.
Well, I keep trying. And I don't think I'm doing very well, but I keep trying to add the L in there, because they're forgetting the Latino and Latina community. So it's actually blame, you know. And I keep trying to
Popularize it.
correct the people who would otherwise just go, oh yeah, I am indeed completely erasing the Latino and Latina community. So yeah,
Max, you got it all wrong there, man. It's Latinx, so you got to get up to date.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although my Latino friends have said in Venezuela, yeah, if he said he was Latinx, he would get killed. So,
right.
So anyway, that's a different topic.
Well, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Max.
We'll leave links to your social media profiles and some of your videos underneath in the description, and hope to talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you for today. It's been great fun, both of you.
It was great to meet you.
You too.
What was that, Max?
I said it was great to meet. I said it was great to meet you. That's all.
It was indeed.
But,
okay.
yeah.
And that's a wrap.